DNA. Test on a 3,000-year-old mummy reveals a terrifying secret. Hello everyone, it's great to have you back on Ancient History, a place where every story can make us rethink everything we once believed to be true. Now think about this. Every day we walk across the ground beneath our feet, assuming it's nothing more than ordinary soil and stone. But what if, beneath that thin layer of dust, something far more extraordinary is hidden? You might assume it's just the remains of the past, long erased by time, but the truth is completely different. Deep underground, there isn't just sand and rock, there's an entire buried world. Ancient cities that once thrived with life, skeletal remains carrying secrets yet to be uncovered, and mysterious mummies that could reshape the way we understand history. There are even massive treasures that have lain untouched for thousands of years. Just hearing that is enough to spark curiosity, isn't it? What's truly fascinating is that every archaeological discovery is far more than simply digging something up. Behind each find lies a thrilling story, mysteries that even scientists continue to debate, and sometimes truths that are stranger than legend itself. Some discoveries, once revealed, force us to ask an unsettling question. Have we ever truly understood the past correctly? And in today's video, we're about to embark on a special journey. A journey where secrets buried for thousands of years are slowly brought to light. Not just to explore, but to realize that history is far from dead. It's still waiting to be told, in ways you could never imagine. So, are you ready to dig beneath the surface of time and uncover what has never been revealed before? If you are, then let's begin with our very first discovery right now. Frankenstein mummies of Scotland. 6 humans combined into one bizarre entity. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but this story actually began quite normally until it gradually turned disturbing in a way no one expected. Back in 2001, on the Hebrides Islands of Scotland, a group of archaeologists was excavating beneath the stone floor of an ancient house. At first, everyone assumed it was just another routine dig. Perhaps they would uncover a few ancient skeletons, document them, and move on. But no. What they discovered sent chills through the entire scientific community. Beneath the floor where they were digging, they uncovered 2 mummies, one male and one female, curled tightly in a fetal position, as if they were trying to return to the very beginning of life. At first glance, this seemed fairly typical for an archaeological find, but the deeper researchers from the University of Manchester looked, the more they realized something was seriously wrong. These bodies had not been preserved in any conventional way. Instead, they had been submerged in a peat bog for hundreds of years. The bog environment, low in oxygen and rich in acid, had effectively acted as a natural embalming chamber, preserving soft tissue in an unusual way. Up to this point, you might think, that makes sense, but this is where things take a darker turn. During a detailed examination, Professor Terry Brown discovered something highly unusual. The female mummy's jawbone did not match her skull. In simple terms, it was like taking a puzzle piece that clearly doesn't belong and forcing it into place. And disturbingly, this mismatch didn't occur in just one area. As DNA testing continued, the truth slowly emerged, one that left everyone unsettled. The body parts of the female mummy, her jaw, skull, arms, and legs, did not belong to the same individual. In fact, they weren't even biologically related to each other. In other words, this body had been assembled from multiple different people. And what about the male mummy? It was no better. The head and neck showed clear signs of being pieced together. A report published in the Journal of Archaeological Science noted that the spine displayed signs of arthritis in the neck region. Yet strangely, those signs completely disappeared in the lower vertebrae, as if the upper and lower halves did not belong to the same body. Even more unsettling, the lower jaw contained a full set of teeth, while the upper jaw had none. A small detail, but enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. After all the analyses, the research team reached a shocking conclusion. These 2 mummies had been constructed from at least 6 different individuals. Even more astonishing, the male mummy appeared to be assembled from bodies that had lived hundreds of years apart, then combined sometime between 1310 and 1130 BC. At this point, you're probably wondering, why would ancient people do such a thing? Was this simply a way to repair damaged bodies during the mummification process? Professor Terry Brown suggested that perhaps a missing head had been replaced with one from another body. But another theory, proposed by Professor Mike Parker Pearson, is even more bizarre. These remains may have been deliberately combined for ritual purposes, representing an entire community, as if multiple individuals had been merged into one. Because of its eerie nature, major outlets like National Geographic and Live Science gave this discovery a haunting name: the Frankenstein mummies, a reference to the creature in Frankenstein assembled from different human parts. And to this day, the mystery remains unsolved. As of 2013, the Hebrides Islands are still the only location in the United Kingdom where prehistoric mummies have been discovered. A finding that not only forced scientists to rethink everything they knew about mummification in Scotland, but also leaves us with a haunting question. What were ancient people truly thinking when they created one human from many? Do you have an answer? If so, don't hesitate to share your thoughts below and join the discussion. The mysterious elixir in a Western Han tomb, China. People often say that beneath every inch of earth lies an untold story, and sometimes all it takes is an unexpected collapse for thousands of years of history to rise before our eyes. And that's exactly what happened. In October 2018, at an active construction site in Luoyang, China, what seemed like an ordinary accident became a doorway into the past. The foundation of the site suddenly gave way, creating a sinkhole about 6.6 feet deep, swallowing two unfortunate workers. Thankfully, they were quickly rescued without serious harm. But that very hole marked the beginning of a far greater mystery. It turned out to be the top of an ancient tomb that had lain undisturbed for over 2,000 years. When archaeologists arrived and secured the site, they realized this was no ordinary burial. It was a large brick tomb dating back to the Western Han Dynasty, a time when wooden graves were being replaced with more durable brick structures like this one. The tomb resembled an underground mansion, measuring about 49 feet long and 46 feet wide, covering roughly 2,260 square feet. Inside, it was divided into 6 distinct sections, including the entrance passage, the main burial chamber, side rooms, corridors, and burial pits. The main chamber alone was impressive, measuring 13.5 feet long, 9.2 feet wide, and 4.3 feet high, constructed with bricks weighing a total of 16 tons. What made this discovery even more remarkable was the complete absence of tomb raiding. To ensure absolute safety for the artifacts, experts made an unprecedented decision. They relocated the entire main chamber to a laboratory at the Luoyang Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology. A large truck was brought in, steel cables were tightly secured, and cameras were even mounted on the tomb to monitor every movement. The operation drew millions of online viewers, as if the entire world was holding its breath to see what secrets lay within. When the past was finally opened, more than 100 burial objects were revealed. Bronze lamps, mirrors, jars, bowls, earrings, all exquisitely crafted and clearly belonging to someone of noble status. Some items were so unique that even seasoned archaeologists paused in awe, such as a goose-shaped lamp and intricately carved cups. Clearly, the tomb's owner was no ordinary person, but the most chilling discovery was something else entirely. A heavily corroded bronze container, seemingly insignificant, was found to hold about 118 fluid ounces of liquid. At first, it was thought to be ancient wine, perhaps a millennium elixir meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. But ordinary wine would have evaporated long ago, making that theory unlikely. So what exactly was this mysterious liquid? To find out, the Luoyang Institute collaborated with experts from the University of Science and Technology Beijing to analyze it. The results stunned everyone. The liquid was not wine, it was a mixture of potassium nitrate and alum, a formula recorded in ancient texts on alchemy. In other words, it was an elixir of immortality, something countless nobles in ancient times desperately sought. It sounds magical, but the truth is far more brutal. Further analysis confirmed that this so-called elixir didn't extend life at all. It could actually cause early death due to poisoning. What was once believed to be the key to eternal life turned out to be the fastest path to the grave. In the end, this 2,000-year-old tomb tells more than just the story of a wealthy noble. It reflects a deeply human obsession, the desire to live forever. Now think about it. If immortality truly existed, would history look the same as it does today? I'm certain it wouldn't. And if that were the case, history itself would have to be rewritten entirely. 200 elixir pills, found in an 1,800-year-old tomb in China. You know, in East Asia, both in the past and even today, burial traditions have never been taken lightly. People believe that if the deceased are properly laid to rest, their descendants in the living world will enjoy peace and prosperity. That's why, from emperors to ordinary citizens, everyone put great care into their final resting place. But have you ever wondered, if a tomb goes against all of those traditions, what kind of story might lie behind it? If not, let's travel back to the 1960s to Xiangshan on the outskirts of Nanjing, China. At that time, archaeologists uncovered a remarkably large joint burial tomb dating back to the Eastern Jin Dynasty, more than 1,600 years ago. At first glance, this might not seem unusual, since joint burials, where a husband and wife are buried together, were quite common. However, the deeper they excavated, the more they realized that this tomb was different from any they had encountered before. Inside, archaeologists discovered numerous valuable burial items: gold-plated porcelain plates, gold and silver jewelry, and various objects that clearly reflected the status of the noble class. But what caught their attention the most was not the treasure. It was over 200 pills placed right beside the tomb's occupant. Sounds mysterious already, doesn't it? Fortunately, although the body had decomposed over time, the tombstone inscription remained intact. It revealed that the person buried there was a high-ranking official from the Eastern Jin Dynasty named Wang Bin, the uncle of Wang Xiji, the legendary sage of calligraphy in Chinese history. However, upon examining the remains, experts made a surprising discovery. The person buried alongside Wang Bin was not his wife, but his daughter, Wang Danhu. According to historical records, Wang Danhu was born in the year 302 and died in 360 at the age of 58. That may not sound unusual at first, but in that era, when women typically married as early as 16 or 17, it was extremely rare for a noblewoman of her status to remain unmarried. Think about it. A prestigious family like the Wangs would have had no shortage of suitors. Yet in the end, she was buried in her family's tomb instead of being laid to rest with a husband, as tradition dictated. This suggests only one thing: she lived her entire life without marrying. But why? The answer may lie in those 200 pills. Experts identified them as wuxi powder, a type of elixir that was extremely popular during the Wei and Jin periods. Originally, it was a medicinal formula created by the famous physician Zhang Zhongjing to treat illnesses. But over time, the nobility came to believe that it could extend life, or even grant immortality. After taking it, users often experienced strange physical symptoms, but instead of questioning the substance, they assumed that they had not taken it correctly, and consumed even more. This trend continued into the Eastern Jin Dynasty, and Wang Danhu's father, Wang Bin, was known to strongly believe in alchemy, so it's not hard to imagine that he directly influenced his daughter. But the truth is far more brutal. Modern science has proven that wuxi powder is no miracle elixir. Its main ingredient is mercury sulfide, a highly toxic substance. Long-term use can damage the nervous system and severely affect reproductive health. In high doses, it can even cause sudden death due to heavy metal poisoning. So the question is, was Wang Danhu's death connected to these pills? No one can say for certain, since her remains are no longer intact for testing. But the presence of over 200 elixir pills placed inside her coffin says a lot. A deep, almost obsessive belief in the promise of immortality. In the end, it may have been that very desire to live forever that led her to forego marriage, choosing instead to follow a path she believed in, only to be left with an unfinished dream that has lingered for more than 1,600 years. So if you had lived in that era, do you think you would have been rational enough to resist being drawn into such dreams of immortality? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Treasure worth $23.7 billion, hidden inside a mysterious cave. What would you think if I told you that some treasures aren't buried beneath the ocean floor or hidden under vast deserts, but instead lie concealed deep within mountains, waiting for a random moment to reveal themselves? It sounds unbelievable, almost like a fantasy, doesn't it? And yet, this is a completely true story. It all happened in March 1979 in Tianshan Town, Gaoyu City, Jiangsu Province, China. At that time, a group of stone quarry workers were working on Shenzhou Mountain, about 28 miles north of the ancient city of Yangzhou. Everything was proceeding as usual, until they encountered an unusually hard layer of rock that was nearly impossible to break using manual methods. With no other option, they decided to use explosives to speed up the process. But that very decision accidentally led to one of the most shocking archaeological discoveries of its time. After a thunderous explosion, the rock shattered, revealing a vast, strange space behind it. One glance was enough to realize this wasn't a natural cave. Instead, it was something far more unusual, a mysterious cave, in the truest sense, appearing right before their eyes. The incident was quickly reported to authorities, and the site was immediately sealed off. Archaeologists were dispatched, and after a short period of study, they reached a conclusion that stunned everyone. The so-called cave was actually an ancient tomb dating back to the Western Han Dynasty. Although the explosion had caused significant damage, what remained was still enough for experts to identify the tomb's owner. Based on excavated artifacts and historical records, they determined it to be the resting place of Liu Shu, the king of Guangling, the fifth son of Emperor Wu of Han, a powerful figure in Chinese history. Inside the tomb, archaeologists discovered numerous artifacts from that era, many considered priceless national treasures. These included jade fragments, bronze items, lacquerware, ceramics, wooden servant figurines, and many other objects, all bearing the unmistakable marks of royal craftsmanship. Remarkably, more than half of these artifacts were exceptionally well preserved. Their intricate design, rarity, and historical value made them nearly impossible to price in monetary terms. However, the true treasure lay in the structure of the tomb itself. Experts later discovered that the entire wooden interior was constructed from golden thread nanmu wood, one of the rarest and most valuable types of wood found only in China. In total, 856 pieces of this precious timber were assembled using an incredibly sophisticated technique. Almost no nails were used, yet the structure remained solid for thousands of years. Just how special is this wood? It emits a natural fragrance, and its grain shimmers like golden silk when exposed to light. The older the tree, the more valuable it becomes, and the highest grade, known as sinking golden thread nanmu, is considered virtually priceless. In ancient times, only royalty could afford to use this wood for building palaces or crafting coffins. There are even reports that in 2013, just a small piece of golden thread nanmu was listed for sale at around 20 million yuan, approximately 2.75 million US dollars. Now imagine multiplying that value across all 856 pieces used in this tomb. Yes, the estimated total value reaches an astonishing 171.2 billion yuan, or roughly 23.7 billion US dollars. A number so massive that even in today's world, it's enough to leave anyone speechless. Following the discovery, the entire tomb complex was carefully restored and later transformed into the Guangling King's Tomb Museum of the Han Dynasty, now open to the public. It has also been officially recognized as a National Cultural Heritage Site, a vivid testament to the wealth and power of ancient royalty. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of the story isn't the treasure itself, it's how it was discovered. Just one accidental explosion and a 2,000-year-old legacy was brought back into the light. Which makes you wonder, beneath our very feet, there may still be countless secrets humanity has yet to uncover. The only question is, will we ever be lucky enough to stumble upon them? The quicksand tomb that claimed 30 grave robbers. Did you know that in ancient China, there was a saying that sounds almost like a joke at first, but becomes chilling the more you think about it? Of 10 Han Dynasty tombs, 9 have been looted. This saying reveals a harsh truth. Thousands of years ago, the battle between the living and the dead never truly ended. On one side were those determined to protect the final resting places of the deceased. On the other were those willing to do anything to break in and seize the treasures buried deep underground. For a long time, many people assumed that those who received lavish burials in ancient China, emperors, nobles, and the wealthy, simply laid to rest and left everything behind, just as we often think today. That death marks the end of all worldly possessions. But that wasn't the case at all. For the ancient Chinese, especially royalty and the elite, preparations for death were often even more meticulous than for life itself. Their tombs were built to be incredibly secure, filled with burial goods, gold, silver, jade, and priceless artifacts. But precisely because of this, these tombs became irresistible targets for grave robbers. And so, a true battle of wits began. Some tombs were so dangerous that they discouraged intruders from the very start. For example, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is believed to contain massive amounts of mercury, enough to turn the entire site into a deadly zone. Or the famous Mawangdui Han tombs, where chemical changes over time created highly flammable gases. A single spark could ignite an inferno, instantly destroying anyone who dared to enter. Other tombs took a more direct approach to defense. Take, for instance, the tomb of a Zhao official from the state of Jin during the spring and autumn period in Taiyuan. Each corner of the tomb was weighted down with stones of about 110 pounds, while gravel surrounded the coffin. Even at a glance, it was clear that disturbing the site would be extremely dangerous. Dig just a little too far, and the stones could collapse, burying intruders alive, as if the ancient builders were saying, "Try it if you dare." But even these defenses pale in comparison to a tomb discovered in the 1990s in Baoji City, Shanxi Province, China. At the time, a local farmer was digging in his yard to build a pigsty when he encountered unusually large stones. Sensing something was wrong, he reported it to the local cultural heritage authorities. Soon after, archaeologists were dispatched to investigate the site. During excavation, workers uncovered not only fine sand, but also multiple mutilated human skeletons. At first, experts believed these remains might belong to sacrificial burials. But as more evidence emerged, archaeologists realized the truth. This was a uniquely deadly tomb filled with lethal traps. Those skeletons belonged to grave robbers who had entered but never made it out. This ancient tomb was a classic example of a quicksand tomb. The sand inside had been specially prepared, heated and dried before being placed in corridors and around the burial chambers. In some areas, there were just a few tons of sand. In others, tens or even hundreds of tons. This sand was incredibly fine and highly mobile. When grave robbers entered, they would first encounter layers of it. The moment they tried to dig even a small amount away, the sand would instantly flow back, filling the gap. No matter how much they dug, it would never be enough. Dig a little, the sand pours back in. Dig more, it fills again. There is no stopping point, no escape. Worse still, the holes dug by robbers were often wide, making it even easier for the sand to collapse inward. Just one small mistake, and both the person and the pit would be swallowed whole. In other words, once you stepped inside, there was only one outcome: becoming an unwilling burial offering. After understanding this mechanism, the archaeological team had to rely on modern machinery to continue excavation. In the end, they discovered 30 skeletons buried within the sand, all of them individuals who had once greedily ventured into a place that was never meant for them. But what's even more astonishing is this: not a single artifact was missing. Thousands of treasures, jade, bronze, and more, remained completely intact, as if the tomb had never been touched for thousands of years. This truly shows how formidable the intelligence of ancient people could be. They didn't just build tombs for burial, they transformed them into deadly fortresses. However, tombs using this quicksand design gradually disappeared after the Eastern Han Dynasty, as if the secret itself had been buried by time. Which is why people say, some treasures are not meant to be taken, and some doors, once you step through them, can never be walked back out of. 7 blood-red skeletons in a 2,500-year-old tomb at the Jinsha site, China. Some archaeological discoveries capture only the attention of scientists, while others send shockwaves through the public. The Jinsha site, located in Chengdu, Sichuan Province, China, is one of those rare places. Alongside Sanxingdui, it is considered one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 21st century, revealing a once thriving civilization that flourished along the upper Yangtze River more than 3,000 years ago. What's fascinating is that it wasn't until 2016 that another secret began to emerge. In the western area of the Jinsha Palace complex, dating back to the Shangzhou period, archaeologists began excavations and uncovered a cluster of ancient tombs that left everyone astonished. Within an area of about 8,600 square feet, they discovered numerous artifacts, including bronze items, pottery, stone tools, and most notably, 7 tombs dating back to the Warring States period. At first glance, this might not seem unusual, but the deeper they dug, the stranger things became. These tombs varied in type: single burials, joint burials, and even graves containing 3 individuals. However, the most striking feature was 2 unusually small coffins, barely large enough for a single person. When experts carefully opened them, the skeletons inside were revealed and immediately left everyone stunned. Because the bones were red, not faintly tinted, not slightly discolored, but a deep, vivid red like blood, even after more than 2,500 years. So why were they red? After thorough analysis, scientists determined that the color came from a thick layer of cinnabar covering the bodies. This substance didn't just stain the bones, it also turned the surrounding soil red. In fact, the use of cinnabar as a pigment in ancient times wasn't unusual, as it retains its color extremely well. However, using it to coat human bodies during burial, this was the first time such a practice had ever been recorded. And that wasn't all. Within this tomb cluster, archaeologists also found evidence of human sacrifice, where living individuals were buried alongside the dead. What's even more striking is that these sacrificial victims were also covered in cinnabar, just like the tomb's primary occupant. Why would they do this? The answer lies in ancient beliefs. Red was seen as the color of blood, and blood symbolized life. Because cinnabar is red, people believed that coating a body with it could give the deceased a chance at rebirth, or at the very least, help sustain their existence in the afterlife. In other words, it was a way of holding on to life, even if only through belief. Additionally, archaeologists discovered a large number of animal bones, such as deer, around the tombs. These animals typically lived in wetland environments, and the way they were buried closely matched sacrificial rituals previously identified at the Jinsha site. This led experts to a compelling hypothesis. Could the people of the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods have been continuing the traditions of the ancient Jinsha civilization? But there's more. Another surprising detail was the height of the skeletons. In the past, it was commonly believed that the ancient Shu people were relatively small in stature. However, many of the skeletons found here were significantly taller, some reaching up to 5 feet 11 inches. This suggests that ancient people may not have been as short as we once thought. Factors such as living conditions, nutrition, or other unknown elements may have played a role. Experts also estimate that the average age of the individuals buried here was around 50 years old, a remarkably high number for a time more than 2 millennia ago. So from just a single burial site, countless questions arise about beliefs, rituals, people, and an entire civilization that once existed. Think about it, a skeleton that remains blood red after 2,500 years. Is it merely a chemical reaction, or does it carry a deeper message? One that ancient people intended to leave behind for future generations, and for those who are passionate about uncovering the mysteries of the past. 2,000-year-old solid gold treasure and a life-or-death standoff with grave robbers in the tomb of the Lord of Sipan. It's not only the tombs of Chinese emperors that are filled with gold and priceless treasures. Around the world, there are burial sites so extraordinary they leave people truly stunned. The story of the tomb of the Lord of Sipan in Peru is one such discovery. Dramatic like a movie, yet revealing an entire civilization once lost to history. Everything began in 1987, when a series of rare artifacts suddenly appeared on the black market, traced back to Peru. What made this unusual was that these items did not belong to the well-known Inca civilization. This immediately raised suspicion for Dr. Walter Alva, a highly perceptive archaeologist. He was certain that somewhere, an important site had just been looted. Without hesitation, he and his team set out for Peru, following every possible lead. After a long search, they finally identified a suspicious location near Chiclayo, in a valley in the north. But when they arrived, the scene was alarming. The tomb had already been opened. Inside, everything was in disarray. Many artifacts were missing, and broken pieces were scattered everywhere. Clearly, grave robbers had gotten there first. If they had arrived just a little later, the entire treasure might have vanished without a trace. This was no small burial site. It consisted of dozens of chambers of various sizes, each filled with valuable grave goods. What made this even more remarkable is that in Peru, many archaeological sites had already been looted since the Spanish colonial period. Combined with ongoing grave robbing, the fact that so many artifacts remained was extremely rare. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Dr. Alva made a bold decision. He and his team would guard the tomb themselves, not for just a day or two, but for many days in a row, under constant threat. Local villagers, accustomed to looting artifacts, gathered to intimidate them, even hurling insults and threats, warning that they would kill him if he didn't leave. But Alva's team stood their ground. Armed for self-defense, they were determined to protect the site until authorities arrived. Eventually, Peru's cultural heritage authorities stepped in, and the official excavation began. The results confirmed their suspicions. This was indeed the tomb of the Lord of Sipan, dating back around 2,000 years, belonging to the ancient Moche civilization, a civilization that flourished between 100 and 700 AD, long before the rise of the Inca. When the main burial chamber was finally opened, everyone held their breath. At the center lay the skeleton of the ruler. In his hand, he held a small, solid, gold scepter-like tool, weighing about 1.1 pounds. His head and chest were covered with a gold mask and countless intricate ornaments. Turquoise inlaid gold pieces, gold and silver necklaces, all layered together to form a dazzling protective display. In total, the body was adorned with 25 layers of precious jewelry. But that wasn't all. Surrounding the coffin were dozens of skeletons, guards and servants, both male and female. Their remains were also covered with gold and silver ornaments. It was a scene both magnificent and deeply chilling. Experts concluded that this discovery was not just about uncovering a tomb, it awakened an entire glorious chapter of ancient Peru. In fact, the splendor of the Sipan tomb has often been compared to that of Qin Shi Huang in the East. Today, more than 660 artifacts from this tomb are displayed at the Royal Tombs of Sipan Museum, serving as vivid evidence of the power and wealth of a once-forgotten civilization. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of the story lies behind the discovery itself. If Dr. Alva hadn't acted in time, would we ever have known about this ancient ruler? It makes you realize some treasures don't just lie buried beneath the earth, they exist on the fragile boundary between human greed and the preservation of history. The skeletons of a man and woman in a treasure-filled ancient tomb. Some tombs, once opened, simply reveal the past, but others, the moment the coffin is lifted, force history itself to be rewritten. Grave 38, an ancient burial at La Almaloya, is exactly that kind of discovery, leaving archaeologists in awe. The story began when researchers from the Autonomous University of Barcelona conducted excavations in the Pliego area of Murcia. At first, they believed it was just another site from the El Argar civilization, a culture that existed nearly 3,700 years ago. But as the soil was carefully removed, what lay beneath far exceeded all expectations. When the coffin was opened, two skeletons appeared, one male, one female, lying side by side. But what truly stunned everyone wasn't the remains themselves. It was what surrounded them. Around the bodies were about 30 finely crafted artifacts, most made of silver, a metal that was extremely rare and valuable at the time. Just imagine, in an era when metal itself was a luxury, owning that many silver objects would have been almost unimaginable, let alone being buried with them. Further analysis revealed that the man died at around 35 to 40 years old, while the woman was younger, approximately 25 to 30. Were they a couple? Possibly, but their true relationship remains a mystery. Then came a detail that began to change everything. On the woman's head was a silver crown. This was not an ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of power. Immediately, archaeologists began to question whether this woman held a special role within El Argar society. Looking at how the burial goods were arranged, the answer seemed to point in a very clear direction. Most of the valuable artifacts were concentrated around the woman. This suggests that although she was buried alongside a man, her status may have been even higher. That might sound surprising, right? For a long time, when we think of ancient civilizations, we tend to assume that power was held by men. But this tomb tells a completely different story. Experts believe that this woman may have been a powerful figure, possibly even a ruler, or a kind of queen of the El Argar society. If confirmed, this would be extremely important evidence showing that women once held central roles in an ancient civilization, something history has largely overlooked. As researchers continue their analysis, they are beginning to understand that these silver objects were not merely decorative. They were symbols of authority, status, and influence. Placing them in the tomb was not just for display. It was a way to assert the identity and power of the deceased, even in the afterlife. At present, studies are still ongoing to better understand the identity of this woman. But even now, Grave 38 has already become one of the most significant discoveries related to the El Argar civilization. As you can see, from just 2 skeletons and a few dozen artifacts, we can reshape our entire understanding of a civilization. Isn't that fascinating? The gold-covered beauty skeleton in a Siberian king's tomb. You know, the ancient world has always been filled with mysteries and fascination in its own unique way. And just like that, there are tombs that, when uncovered, don't just reveal wealth. They expose rituals so chilling that they send shivers down the spine of modern observers. The story of an ancient king's tomb in Siberia is one such example, a place where gold, power, and death intertwine in ways no one could have expected. When archaeologists began excavating this burial site, they quickly realized it was no ordinary tomb. From the very first layers of soil, numerous gold ornaments began to appear, gleaming as if time itself had never touched them. But what drew the most attention lay at the very center of the tomb. There was the skeleton of a young woman, almost entirely covered in gold. And consider this, around 2,600 years ago, for a woman to be buried with such an immense amount of gold, her status must have been anything but ordinary. Experts believe she may have been the wife or a consort of the king buried there. But the story doesn't end with luxury. Upon closer analysis, researchers discovered that the male skeleton, the primary occupant of the tomb, showed signs of prostate cancer. This is an extremely rare finding in archaeology, as identifying diseases in ancient bones is not always possible. And what about the woman? To this day, the cause of her death remains a mystery. There are no clear signs indicating that she died from illness. Because of this, researchers have proposed a chilling hypothesis. She may have been poisoned and buried alongside the king. That alone is unsettling, but it doesn't stop there. As the excavation expanded, archaeologists uncovered something even more disturbing. Surrounding the main tomb was an entire entourage of remains. A total of 35 skeletons, including 16 men, 13 women, 5 children, and 1 individual of unidentified sex. All of them were buried together, as if they had no say in their own fate. And it wasn't just humans. There were also 14 horses buried alongside them. Think about that for a moment. A burial ritual involving the sacrifice of both people and animals. How brutal must it have been? Experts believe that this entire entourage may have been killed to accompany and serve the king in the afterlife. This was not an unfamiliar practice in many ancient cultures, but each time it is discovered, it leaves a haunting impression. What's particularly striking is that the findings in this tomb closely match the accounts of Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian who described the burial rituals of the Scythians. According to his writings, when a leader died, loyal servants would be killed and buried with him to continue serving in the next world. And now, thousands of years later, his words are being confirmed by the very skeletons lying silently beneath the earth. But returning to the gold-covered woman, the biggest question remains unanswered. Who was she? And why did she have to die? Was she a devoted wife who willingly chose to follow her husband, or a victim of a ritual she could not escape? No one can say for certain. All we know is that beneath the glitter of gold and the weight of absolute power, there have always been dark corners of history that are not easily told. And sometimes the most terrifying thing is not death itself, but how humans treat one another before death ever comes. What do you think? 2,000-year-old shipwreck beneath the Turkish Sea reveals a shocking secret. Beneath the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Adrasan in southern Turkey, an underwater archaeological discovery has stunned the world. A shipwreck dating back around 2,000 years lies quietly at a depth of 118 to 148 feet, like a time capsule of an ancient civilization, perfectly preserved beneath the sea. What truly astonished scientists, however, wasn't just the ship's age, but the remarkable condition of its cargo. Hundreds of ceramic artifacts, bowls, plates, trays, and pots adorned with intricate designs have retained their vibrant colors after 2 millennia underwater. Can you imagine that? An ancient treasure, never looted, still resting there as if it had just been loaded onto the ship yesterday. This vessel is believed to date from the late Hellenistic period to the early Roman era, around the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD, when maritime trade among Mediterranean port cities was at its peak. The artifacts found are not only evidence of a maritime accident, but also vivid proof of an ancient trade network that once stretched across the eastern Mediterranean. Turkey's Minister of Culture and Tourism, Mehmet Nuri Ersoy, even personally dived to the seabed to witness the shipwreck firsthand. He described it as an unprecedented discovery, and that claim is hardly an exaggeration. It is extremely rare for an ancient ship to preserve its cargo structure intact after thousands of years, something that could reshape our understanding of ancient transportation and storage techniques. So what allowed these ceramic items to defy time so spectacularly? The answer lies in a coarse clay coating applied by ancient people before transport. This layer acted like a natural biological sealant, wrapping each item and protecting it from saltwater corrosion and microorganisms. This is the first time scientists have observed this technique used on such a large scale, and it may be the reason the ship's entire cargo appears to have been frozen in time. If you thought only modern humans had advanced packaging solutions, it seems the ancients were far ahead of their time. Archaeologists also believe the ship was carrying everyday goods, likely intended for major port cities or trading outposts along the Mediterranean coast. The neatly arranged cargo, still in its original order and undisturbed, suggests the ship sank suddenly, possibly due to a storm or an underwater collision, rather than looting or gradual decay. This greatly enhances the archaeological value of the wreck, as it allows researchers to study exactly how ancient people packaged, transported, and stored goods, an area we still know surprisingly little about. Of course, this discovery is just one part of a much larger picture. More than 400 shipwrecks have been identified between Patara and Mersin, a staggering number that suggests this region was once a bustling maritime highway in ancient times. Imagine fleets of sailing ships loaded with wine, olive oil, grain, textiles, and pottery, braving rough seas to connect cultures from east to west. Now, thanks to the ocean's remarkable preservation, we are gradually uncovering the colorful pieces of that story. Interestingly, around the same time, surprising archaeological discoveries have been emerging in other parts of the world as well. In Lima, construction workers installing pipelines accidentally uncovered a pre-Inca tomb containing the remains of a child aged 10 to 15. Astonishingly, the body was so well preserved that its dark brown hair remained intact after more than 1,000 years. This shows that, even on opposite sides of the globe, ancient mysteries continue to surface, challenging what we thought we knew about lost civilizations. And it doesn't stop there. In Egypt, scientists have recently proposed a possible explanation for the infamous Pharaoh's Curse, a phenomenon that shocked the world when several members of the team who opened the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 died under mysterious circumstances. Today, researchers suspect the cause may not have been supernatural, but rather toxic bacteria or fungi that developed within the sealed tomb environment. These findings could even open new directions in modern medicine, particularly in the fight against diseases like cancer. All of these discoveries, from the 2,000-year-old shipwreck in Turkey to the pre-Inca tomb in Peru to the possible explanation behind the Pharaoh's Curse, point to one powerful truth. History is not something that is finished. It is still unfolding, day by day, layer by layer of earth, with every deep-sea dive and every accidental excavation. And with each discovery, another door opens, bringing us closer to the ancient mysteries that were never truly lost, only waiting to be told. And with that, our journey of discovery comes to a pause, but the mysteries are far from over. Because every archaeological discovery is not just a story of the past, it's a reminder that history is still lying right beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered. We may have learned a few new truths today, but who knows? Tomorrow, those very truths could be reshaped by a new discovery. What do you think? How many secrets are still buried, never touched by human hands? And if one day they are finally revealed, will history still look the way we believe it does now? If you found these stories fascinating, don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next mysteries, because this journey of discovery has only just begun. For now, goodbye and see you next time.